critics are howling about the new Paw Patrol movie.
Awesome!
It's filled with adventure.
This is off the leash!
And fun for the whole family.
A dog?
Actually, sir, I'm a puppy.
Paw Patrol, the movie. Rated G. In theaters and on Paramount Plus this Friday.
When it comes to working at Geico, our best advocates are our employees, like Maxine. But since she is so focused on growing her career, we hired an actor to read her story.
At Geico, I love mentoring the new associates to help them make this a career and not just a job.
And with new opportunities and job stability, Geico has been helping people grow their careers for over 75 years. The only downside, she still hasn't met the gecko. Where are you, fella?
Ready to start your career, Fredericksburg? We're hiring claim sales and service agents. Apply online today at geico.job/Fredericksburg.
True crime horror story contains extreme violence and adult subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Of all the stages of man, the teenage years are the most awkward and peculiar, both physically and mentally. Seemingly innocent girls who used to find endless delight in hosting tea parties with mud cakes for their dressed-up dolls might morph into sullen princesses who out of the blue spend most of their time in front of a mirror or on a cell phone, all behind closed doors. Cute little boys who used to climb trees and catch bugs for entertainment might sometimes change into moody minors who grunt or grumble if they answer you at all. And the child that once told you absolutely everything could have secrets that they only share with their friends. In order to become an adult, it's inevitable to go through this phase, and since we've experienced it ourselves, we gather our memories from time to time to try to assist our own teenagers on the journey to adulthood. However, times, technology, and trends change at such a rapid pace that we seem to always be a couple of steps behind. This phase between adolescence and adulthood is so crucial to a young person growing into a responsible member of society, and the window for us parents to install a moral compass is so small that the responsibility of forming a young mind seems daunting. Apart from the life lessons that we transfer to them, there's really not much else to do but guide them through these crucial passages of time. As if the young mind does not face enough challenges through these formative years, the body also seems to have a mind of its own. Hairs start to sprout in odd places. While the voice boxes on boys change pitch, girls gain curves. Our inner and outer biology seem to grow at different times, leaving a young person with the feeling that their spirit doesn't quite fit into the vessel it was meant for. It's a time peppered with first love, first kiss, first shave, first driving lesson. No doubt the teenage years might be the most exciting, but confusing and intense time of our lives. But no matter how overwhelmed we become with the urge to experiment during this phase, I doubt the large majority of teenagers think about their first kill. Demographically speaking, children form part of the vulnerable sector of society, and that's most likely why when a child commits a murder in a violent, unprovoked, and sadistic manner, our logic struggles to digest the phenomena. In today's episode, I want to share with you 3 such stories, and if you, like me, are left with more questions than answers, feel free to share them on all of our social media platforms like the True Crime Horror Story official Facebook group. We love hearing from you, and these cases are so nightmarish that they will most likely linger in your mind long after the end of the show. So kick back with your Pepsi and your box of Stridex, and let me tell you about some of the worst murders committed by children that the world has ever seen. These are killer kids, terrifying teens, and children with chilling intent. I am your host, JD Horror, and this is True Crime Horror Story, Season 4, Episode 9, The Youth Gone Wild.
Are people afraid of you, Beth? Who's afraid of you, Beth?
John.
Your brother. And why is your brother afraid of you?
Because I hurt him so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what, at nighttime, what do your parents do to your door?
Lock it shut.
Why do they lock it shut?
Because they don't want me to hurt John.
Right. And they're kind of afraid of hurting John? Of you hurting John?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they afraid that you might hurt them?
Yep.
Would you, Beth?
Mm-hmm.
When would you do it?
Nighttime.
Okay. Why would you do nighttime?
Because I don't like them seeing me do it. But they can feel me do it.
Mm-hmm. And what would you do to him, Beth?
Stab him.
Okay. What would you stab him with?
A knife.
Part 1. The Toddler on the Train Tracks. As I've mentioned before, the teenage years are challenging, but the terrible twos take a firm second place. Babies change into balls of energy, ready to launch themselves at whatever looks interesting. Anyone who's ever tried to navigate shopping while accompanied by a toddler will testify that mothers deserve medals for being able to manage both. To Denise Bulger, being a mother was her destiny. She met her husband at the age of 18, and the two soon married. Coming from a big family, Denise wanted a big brood of her own, but after her first pregnancy resulted in a stillbirth, Denise took no chances. Prenatal care was doubled up, and every precaution possible was taken care of, and finally, she and husband Ralph welcomed a beautiful bouncing boy named James Patrick Bulger into the world. The Bulger household was filled with love. Denise's extended family was incredibly close, and James was showered with affection from both of his parents. Like most stay-at-home moms, Denise spent every moment with her child. On the morning of Friday, February 12, 1993, Denise and a friend had some errands to run at the Strand Mall in Liverpool, the town in which they lived. It's a massive plaza with more than 100 shops, and so the two ladies decided not to take the stroller because there wouldn't be enough room in the car for their bags as well. Denise would go on to resent this, as she did with many other decisions that she made that day. As the shopping for the day wrapped up, Denise had one final purchase to make at the butcher shop. Just before letting go of James's hand to complete the transaction, she looked down at him and told him not to move. She paid for her purchase, and when she looked down again, James was gone. Later it would be confirmed on security camera footage that James exited the butcher shop at 3:39 p.m., and Denise came rushing out at 3:40. As she left the shop, frantic with fear, she had to choose between going left or right to search for her son. Denise chose left, the wrong path. Realizing her search alone would render no results, she got a hold of mall security, and after a 40-minute search, the police were called. The search for James Bulger was unlike Liverpool had ever seen. Using more than 100 police officers, the media frenzy was unbelievable and the international coverage extensive. Once video footage of James being taken out of the shopping center by two teenagers was released, Denise almost felt a sense of relief because she believed that two young boys would never hurt a baby. Grainy images of the two boys were released to the media, but to no avail. On Valentine's Day, 2 days after the kidnapping of James Bulger, a group of teenagers found the boy's body on the railroad tracks. A train had severed the little boy's remains in two, but the cause of the death was not due to the train running him over. It was clear that James had suffered many different injuries, including 42 wounds and 10 skull fractures. Oddly, blue paint had been squirted into his eyes and batteries were stuffed into his mouth. Unconfirmed reports were made of batteries also found in his anus, and his pants and underwear had been removed, which led itself to speculation that there might have been a sexual motive for the murder. The abduction and murder of the 2-year-old was an incredible shock to the community, but none of the citizens of Liverpool were prepared for the facts that would come to light as the case unfolded. When police received a call from a concerned mother of a 10-year-old boy who had blue paint on his jacket and who happened to have skipped school, they didn't think too much of it. But when his friend was also identified as having skipped school for the day and having the same blue paint on his clothes, both boys and their parents were asked to accompany the police to the station. Robert Thompson was a troubled youth and a known troublemaker. He was the fifth out of 7 boys, and his single mother tried to cope with her unruly family by drinking. The Thompson boys were also notorious for truancy. Robert had missed a third of the school year already, and his partner in crime was another 10-year-old boy by the name of John Venables, who by all accounts didn't have an easier home life. He had 2 younger siblings, and the family was just as economically challenged, and John's mom also looked for solutions deep inside the bottle. John was small for his age. Doctors determined that he had suffered from fetal alcohol syndrome, which is clearly evident by his stunted growth and his low-set years. Psychologically, you can prepare yourself by reminding yourself that they are only 10, but once you hear how incredibly young they sound, you can appreciate the immaturity of these children.
I know the truth. I believe I know the truth.
I was there.
That's right.
You waved.
Correct, but I know that a lot of things that have gone on.
Yeah, well, do you know it was me that killed him? It wasn't. I never even killed him.
Yeah, we was, but we never saw any kids there. We never wrote any kids.
So you were in Bootle Strand?
Was you in Bootle Strand?
Yeah, but we never got a kid, Mum. We never got
Mrs. Venables, would you... I must ask you not to get angry with it.
Police were sensitive to the ages of the kids, always having a parent present during the interview and catering to their every need while interrogations were kept short. But finally, as the police expected he would, John broke.
A short while ago, as is detailed on your custody record out there, you had a conversation with your mum, and you then requested that myself and Dave Tanner come into the room. Is that right? Yeah. And what was it you told us?
That I killed James.
Like his co-conspirator, he blamed the other boy for the murder, but it was evident that both boys had an equal role in the horrific deed. Robert Thompson might have well been the instigator, but John Venables was a willing participant from the very beginning. According to the account that the 2 boys gave, they decided to skip school for the day and just be a nuisance at the mall. They shoplifted a couple of items, including the batteries and the paint later found on James, harassed an old lady while she was shopping, and then, out of the blue, decided to kidnap a baby. After one failed attempt, the boys spotted little James Bulger, and it was game on. Toddlers have the attention span of a puppy, and at precisely the right moment, they lured the boy away from his mother. From the time they kidnapped James to the point they exited the mall, only 4 minutes had passed, and in those 240 seconds, everything changed for the Bulger family. The 2 boys led James by his hand out of the mall, and navigating through the back streets of Liverpool, they made their way to the railroad tracks. This journey took more than 2 miles to complete, and for a toddler who had been subjected to an entire day of shopping, it would have been a harrowing one. Unsurprisingly, James started crying, and a total of 38 witnesses would testify to seeing the child in distress and even approaching the 2 boys, but Robert and John would say that it's just their little brother being a pain and that they were going to take him home. One witness would testify to seeing a large gash on James's head, and another testified to seeing one of the boys kick James in the stomach. Still, not a single person, despite several signs that this child was in distress, said anything. Remember that these boys were only 10 years old. Their original plan was to push the toddler into oncoming traffic, but there would have been too many witnesses. Then they wanted to drown him in the canal, but by now an exhausted and bleeding James was too upset to cooperate with the hike. After dragging James for 2 miles to the train tracks, they then launched into an attack by throwing bricks and rocks at the little boy in an effort to kill him. But it turned out murdering someone was a little harder than what the boys had seen in the movies, and when James kept on getting up and asking for his mama, the 2 killers took turns beating on him with an iron bar. As previously mentioned, he was found with his pants down and batteries shoved into his mouth and possibly other places.
We took him on the rail truck and started throwing bricks at him.
Why did he throw bricks at him?
No.
Did it make him fall over?
No.
So you're saying he threw the same house brick at him, full in the face, and he didn't fall over?
Yeah, he did fall over. He just kept on getting back up again. He wouldn't stay down.
What was he saying while he was doing all this?
He was saying to stay down. He was stupid, didn't he?
Why did he want him to stay down?
I don't know. He wanted them dead properly.
Regardless of their age, the people of Liverpool were mad with rage, and mobs of citizens would gather outside of the courtroom, shouting threats and pelting the prison wagon with rocks as it transported the boys to and from the proceedings. There was no doubt about the guilt of the kids, and the question of whether they knew what they were doing was wrong or not was also clear. There was also too much evidence that the murder was preconceived. Both boys were found guilty, and usually the sentence for a crime like that would be life in prison. But the judge felt that the boys were too young for that kind of punishment. They were detained at Her Majesty's pleasure for the period of 12 years, but they both would eventually serve only 8 years and were set free under new identities, protected from the angry mob of the community. How this could happen, I truly don't understand, because the rehabilitation center was more like a vacation home, with outings to soccer matches and a first-class education, something that the two never would have had in their previous lives. Their conduct during the time was also far from stellar, with frequent violent episodes being reported. Robert Thompson was caught having an illicit affair with one of the staff members at the institution. An average of £3,000 a week is spent per child to run this type of facility, and once the thousands of pounds spent on hiding the identity of the boys came to light, the British people were furious. Venables specifically made it very difficult for authorities by frequently telling people his real identity and continuing his aggressive behavior. He picked up an alcohol and drug problem, despite being warned not to. He has returned numerous times to Liverpool, drinking and picking up girls, not caring if he ran into the Bolger family. And 8 years after his release, he was convicted of being in possession of child pornography and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Not long after he was released from that sentence, he was caught again with over 1,000 child porn images and again was incarcerated. Representatives of the United Kingdom asked Canada and New Zealand very nicely if they would take Venables, but both politely declined, stating that all immigrants must meet a certain criteria, and he definitely doesn't. Robert Thompson has since vanished into the horizon. There's speculation that he had taken up with a lover in Australia, but nothing has been confirmed. This is one of those rare cases that leads to a question: should child offenders be given a second chance? I know they were only 10 at the time, but their acts were so brutal that this case will forever leave chills down my spine.
So we walked up to him and we were walking around with him and I took his hand.
Well, whose idea was it to walk towards him?
Mine.
Was it?
Then it was Robert's idea to kill him. And we went outside to take him out.
What for?
Don't know, we said let's throw him in the water. He was persuading him, he said kneel down and let's look at the water and all that, but he wouldn't. Because when we wouldn't get him down, Robert picked him up and threw him on the floor and that's where he got his bump on his head.
Who took hold of him?
Robert. He was dragging him along the road where the security camera was.
Where'd you go with him after that?
The reservoir where that woman spotted us.
Is young James walking with you by this time, or are you still having to pull him?
He was walking with us.
Was he upset, or had he made friends with you?
He was alright.
Streaming only on Peacock.
She was this moneyed, social girl.
Ghislaine Maxwell had it all until she met Jeffrey Epstein.
Maxwell helped connect him to the wealthy and famous.
Then it all came crashing down.
Ghislaine Maxwell's charged with enticement of minors, sex trafficking of children, and perjury.
Now a new 3-part documentary reveals her story.
How on earth could she have got to this place?
Epstein's Shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Part 2. Bloody Monday. Geraldine Kriegel was having one of those crazy Mondays that the songs are written about. It was May 14th, 2018, and the green landscape around her was evidence that the summer had already arrived in Leixlip, in the county of Kildare in Ireland. She missed a call from her daughter Anna, but wasn't very concerned, as she was already on her way home. Geraldine and her retired French lecturer husband, Patrice, adopted Anna from an orphanage in western Siberia when she was only 2 in 2004. Family members were concerned how the couple would blend with the new addition, but the three fit together quickly, and soon Anna settled in as a member of the household. The couple was so happy with the adoption that soon afterwards, little Aaron was added to the family, and the four were a perfect fit with so much closeness and love that young Anna could only blossom. Later, however, since Anna started middle school, there were a few problems. Suddenly, Anna would end up almost daily in fights, and went as far as to exaggerate injuries in order for someone to take her seriously. Bullies only needed one reason to gun for you, and every school has them, and Anna was an open target. She was adopted, which was a fact that was frequently used in attacks. She was deaf in one ear and had incredibly bad eyesight due to a tumor that had been removed. At 14, she was already 5'8", and while some might think her height to be extraordinary, her peers thought she was a freak. As if the torment she suffered at school was not enough, online trolls would make sexually explicit remarks on her social media accounts, and one even told her that she should be executed. Despite her height, Anna had a much younger temperament and was a lot more innocent than most. Her mother Geraldine had insisted that all electronics be handed over to her at the end of the day, including all passwords to social media sites, something that all parents should implement. Anna was unhappy, but complied, and only then did the extent of the bullying sink in with Geraldine. Geraldine entered their home just before 5 that day and called for her daughter and for her husband. The moment Patrice told her that a boy had come calling for Anna, and the two had left together, Geraldine knew something was wrong. No one ever came to visit Anna. She was one of the loneliest children in Ireland. Anna had no friends. Her younger cousin was her favorite companion. She sent the words via DM, "Home now," but got no response. She swiftly followed it up with a statement that if Anna didn't respond immediately, she was going to call the police, but still, no answer. Sadly, by this time, Anna had already been murdered. In this tragic tale, we have no other names than Boy A and Boy B, due to the fact that the two people responsible for the murder of Anna Kriegel were only 13 years old at the time. Boy B, who was the one who collected Anna on her doomed fate, told her that Boy A was waiting for her at an abandoned manor house, a stately old mansion that had become run down and had fallen under ill repair. Despite her confusion, Anna left her house, telling her dad that she wouldn't be long. Geraldine's motherly instincts told her that something was incredibly wrong. She knew Anna had no friends, and no one ever came to see her. The couple started searching around the neighborhood, but soon realized that they were going to need some help. They then went to the Garda, which is the Irish police, to report their daughter missing, and officers took the complaint seriously, and soon a full-blown search for Anna was launched. It didn't take Garda long to identify Boy B, and after a long interview that felt like pulling teeth with a pair of pliers, Boy B finally gave up the identity of Boy A and where Anna might be found. Her battered and bruised remains were discovered in one of the dimly lit rooms of the abandoned mansion. The floor was saturated with her blood, and not one part of her body was left untouched. Her hair was matted with crimson, her skin covered in dirt, and 3 of her fingers were stuck between her throat and the ligature around her neck. The coroner would later find that Anna suffered over 50 different injuries, and that blunt force trauma to the head was the cause of her death. She had been beaten with a 2x4 with nails protruding on both sides, and then with a cinder block that lay amongst the rubble. Apart from her socks, she was naked and bound, and an attempt at sexually assaulting her had definitely been made, since semen was found on the black top that Anna had worn. With Boy A, the case relied heavily on forensic evidence. Not only did he have blood on his boots that belonged to Anna, but a kind of murder kit bag was found in his possession. It contained shin guards, knee pads, duct tape, gloves, as well as a mask that Boy A had made as a Halloween project. This zombie mask, as it would be referred to, was what Boy A wore when he attacked Anna. Anna's blood was also found in the items in the bag, and the semen found on Anna's clothing was identified as belonging to Boy A. The evidence against Boy B rested on whether he knew that Boy A had premeditated the murder and thus had led Anna to her death. The prosecutor put forth a conversation that took place a month prior between the boys, during which Boy A explicitly told Boy B that not only did he want to murder someone, but his intended victim was Anna. The Crown argued that by taking Anna to the abandoned house, he knew that Boy A was going to murder her. He also eventually admitted that he witnessed the beginning of the attack, although he said that when she was in distress, he ran away. The jury found both boys guilty, and they were given lifelong sentences with the possibility of parole in 12 years. After all, these two boys were only 13 when the murder was committed. If both could prove themselves to have been rehabilitated, they would be released in their 20s. Interestingly enough, Boy A, the boy who mercilessly lay in wait and attacked Anna, showed remorse from the moment he knew he was in the corner. Boy B, however, continued to lie to the Garda and refused to accept any responsibility for Anna's death. When the verdict was read, Boy B's father stood up in the gallery and started hurling insults at the judge. He was escorted out of the court and returned shortly afterwards, slow clapping in mock celebration. Another aspect of the case that was omitted from the jury was that over 12,000 pornographic images were found on the two phones belonging to Boy A. He also made searches for child porn, animal porn, horse porn, and the dark web. His lawyer managed to keep all this evidence out of the trial, but I have a feeling that if he's ever released, we have not seen the last of this budding little psychopath.
Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals. John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
Clowns can get away with murder.
And Epstein's Shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Snapped. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.
Part 3. The Devil's Daughter.
Past the sentence, Mr. Justice Scott Baker told Carr, it is clear that killing, in your words, turns you on. You are a very dangerous young woman. As Sharon Carr left the dock, she was smiling. She may spend the rest of her life behind bars.
On June 7th, 1994, Sharon Carr was arrested at the Collingwood College in Surrey, England, when she attacked another 13-year-old girl in the bathroom. Carr had a frightening reputation, and as she stabbed the girl twice, she laughed while tossing her knife from one hand to the other. The young girl's life was saved by staff interrupting the attack, and Carr was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Unfortunately for her, she couldn't keep one of her deepest and darkest secrets, and by bragging about her crime to fellow inmates, Sharon became England's youngest female convicted murderer. Sharon was born in Belize. Her story is not unlike many children who derail on their way to adulthood. Both parents were incredibly sadistic and abusive, and Sharon's father left the family to fend for themselves in already derelict circumstances. She suffered numerous incidents of physical and sexual abuse. Her mother practiced voodoo, and Sharon took a liking to the dark arts, especially animal sacrifices. Soon her mother met a British man, and the two married, moving the family to the county of Surrey, England. It was not long before Sharon gained a reputation for being the scary kid on the block. She started drinking at the age of 10, and by 11 she was smoking weed. She was completely unsupervised and terrorized the neighborhood on a regular basis. It was rumored that she decapitated a dog and that she had grilled a gerbil alive. She gained a reputation as a violent and dangerous youth and was frequently involved in fights. She was also known to carry a switchblade with her at all times. Ironically, she was rather petite in stature, but what she lacked in size, she more than made up for in viciousness. Somehow this disturbed child fell through the cracks, and only once she was arrested for the attack on the 13-year-old girl did authorities take notice of her violent nature. During her 2-year incarceration, she not only told fellow inmates of a murder she had committed, but a guard as well. When Katie Radcliffe's badly mutilated body was found in the early hours of June 7th, 1992, police were certain that they were dealing with a male suspect in his 20s. The brutality of the attack on the 18-year-old hairdresser spoke of a sexually sadistic act. The over 30 knife wounds, some piercing right through her body, showed unparalleled aggression and anger. Sharon had mutilated Katie's breasts, vagina, and anus. She also stole Katie's bracelet, which was a detail the police didn't reveal during the investigation. The court also found it no coincidence that the attack on the 13-year-old took place exactly 2 years to the day after Sharon's attack on Katie. The evidence was overwhelming. Not only did Sharon give a full confession, the bracelet she had stolen from Katie was found on her person. However, the most damning piece of evidence was the diary they found that belonged to Sharon, in which she starts off with the words, "I am a killer. Killing is my business, and business is good." Other damning statements in her diary read as follows: "I was born to be a murderer. Killing for me is a mass turn-on, and I get so high I never want to come down. Sometimes I see the devil in my dreams, or in the mirror, but then I realize I'm just seeing my own reflection." About murdering Katie, she wrote, "I wish I could kill you again. I promise you, I would make you suffer more. Your terrifying screams turn me on. Bringing the knife into her chest, she's pleading with me, and I plunge the knife deeper and deeper into her body." Sharon Carr was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 14 years, which was soon reduced to 12 years. For some undetermined reason, her name was also released publicly. Katie's family was livid and the public outcry massive. Sharon, however, couldn't stay out of trouble, frequently getting into fights and even planning openly to kill her cellmate by throwing her down the stairs and cutting her throat. After she was placed in solitary confinement, she tried to cut herself repeatedly to see if she was a lizard. This behavior convinced prison staff that she needed more psychiatric help than they could offer, and she was transferred to the Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital, where she was identified with schizoid affective disorder. An interesting note I have to mention is that the hospital during that time was still hosting male and female inmates, and it was during one of these mixers held for patients that Sharon met Robbie Lane, and the two instantly fell in love. Robbie had been committed because he strangled, stabbed, and then gouged out his own mother's eyes in an argument. The romance blossomed quickly, and soon a 20-minute wedding ceremony was approved by the staff. Just days before the happy event, an article was placed in the local paper announcing the intended marriage, and also recounting in detail the crimes that the two delinquents were charged with. Both had an opportunity to read the article, and in a bizarre outcome, both were so repulsed by the other's crimes that they immediately called the whole thing off. Sharon is still institutionalized to this day and will more than likely never be released, since she's never shown a single sign of improvement. Being a parent of four myself, our subject matter today hits home for me in that in these situations, of course my deepest sympathies are with the victims, but I also feel for the parents of these killer kids. Imagine bearing a child and doing your best to raise them, only for the bad seed that flourished from your loins to grow into a miniature monster. There are so many subjects that need a deeper discussion, such as bullying, access to social media control, pornography, and detecting mental illness in children. The world is an ever-changing place, and if we don't adapt with the times, and if we're not able to identify issues and threats in our children's lives, tragedies like these might continue to happen. We're supposed to protect children, but who protects children from other children? Especially in the case of little James Bulger, the question of rehabilitation while incarcerated really bothers me. In the case of the murder of Anna Kriegel, are we sure boy A and boy B will be sufficiently rehabilitated and remorseful? Why don't we ask members of their community in Ireland what they think? The heinous actions of other minors have greatly impacted the lives of members of my own family, and there will never truly ever be forgiveness or justice for that. The system doesn't care about the victim if the perpetrator is also a juvenile, only rehabilitation for the offender. And what in my humble opinion should be a bullet in the head ends up with a slap on the wrist instead more often than not. As always, we welcome your thoughts, questions, and opinions on this topic on all of our social media sites. Parents, keep your children close and be careful, because sometimes keeping them safe is more than just keeping an eye on the stranger in the white van. Sometimes, death can ride 2 wheels instead of 4. And if it's your very own child you should worry about, sleep with one eye open.
Stab him.
Okay. What would you stab him with?
A knife.
Thanks for joining us for Season 4, Episode 9 of True Crime Horror Story. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Suggested viewing similar to today's cases, The Good Son, a 1993 thriller starring Macaulay Culkin, directed by Joseph Rubin, and Child of Rage, a 1990 documentary about an extremely troubled young girl. If you like what you hear here on True Crime Horror Story, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. You can also think about joining our Patreon at www.patreon.com/truecrimehs. And then stay tuned after this show on Patreon for the True Crime Horror Story After Show with Dom and JD, as well as early access to ad-free episodes and exclusive bonus content available only on Patreon. This episode was researched and written by Misdemeanor. It features music by Mechanical Ghost, producer LB from the No One Likes Us podcast, and The Quiet Type, as well as artwork by Nuclear Heat Graphics. Sources for this episode's case are available in the credits section of our website. Has violent crime impacted you or someone close to you? Send us your story at truecrimehorrorstory@gmail.com. True Crime Horror Story. Sometimes truth is more brutal than fiction.
Hello and welcome to Trust and Evil. I am Sam.
And I'm Bryony.
And we want to give you the lowdown of what we are going to be covering in our podcast.
So we aim to cover children and the abuse that they've suffered in the ones that they love.
And the ones they're supposed to trust.
The ones that do them over in the worst possible way.
Yeah. Also, we would like to cover domestic violent cases as well.
Children, domestic violence, definitely domestic violence.
Yeah,
there's not
male,
many,
female.
Yeah, there's not many podcasts that actually cover domestic violence, and I think it's such a big thing nowadays. Everyone needs to be talking about it, focusing on it, listening, seeing it as what it is, and the same with children as well.
Yeah, for sure. We're not saying that we won't cover other things. Whatever takes our interest, whatever seems
relevant
at the moment, then we will cover that too. But predominantly, that is what we want to focus on.
Yeah, for sure. So I hope you enjoy our podcast and leave us some reviews because we need them.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Anyone can be ready for back to school. But with Staples Connect, you can be more than ready. Like, I got everything from my classroom and saved a ton ready. We've got more backpacks, more pens, and more supplies than you ever thought possible. So double knot your shoes, gas up the minivan, and smear war paint on your face. Staples has everything you need and more for the new school year. Let's do this. Just visit your nearest Staples store or go to staplesconnect.com for inspiration.
Paw Patrol the movie is 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
Awesome!
Critics are howling it's filled with laughs.
This is off the leash!
And bigger and better than ever.
A dog? Actually, I'm a puppy.
Paw Patrol the movie, rated G, in theaters and on Paramount Plus this Friday.